This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Now, world stocks hovered near record highs today on hopes for a coronavirus vaccine and additional U.S. economic stimulus. Emerging market stocks rose in tandem. We saw MSCI's index rising 0.2% on the day. It was a few points short of a near 32-month high. On the continent, South Africa's JSE climbing over 1%. The JSE was firmer as some positive economic data lifted sentiment, with investors more confident about an economic recovery. In Nigeria, the stock exchange was muted today, but the all-share has performed pretty well so far, climbing 30.48% year to date. Nigerian breweries was a major drag on the market today. However, it fell about 7% on the day. Now, also coming up on today's show. The UK becomes the first nation to approve the rollout of a COVID-19 vaccine. Nigeria steps up efforts to revive oil refineries in the country. And we look at an African online startup deploying electric rickshaws to slash maintenance costs. Let's start off with some vaccine news. Britain has become the first country in the world to approve the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine. It says that it will be rolled out from early next week. Now, Britain's vaccine committee will decide which priority groups will get the jab first, such as care home residents, health and care staff, the elderly, and people who are clinically extremely vulnerable. Both Pfizer-BioNTech and U.S. biotech firm Moderna have reported preliminary findings of more than 90% effectiveness in trials of their vaccines. Pfizer says that Britain's emergency use authorization marks a historic moment in the fight against COVID-19. And in the United States, the number of people hospitalized with COVID-19 has hit a new record, and there's no relief in sight. New infections are up again after a holiday dip. Now, the surge comes as the White House is pressing the Food and Drug Administration to approve a vaccine, and as health officials are deciding who will be first in line to receive it. Here's CGTN's Rory Rottenberg with more.
A panel of scientific experts at the U.S. Centers for Disease Control meeting on Tuesday to decide who should get the first batch of 20 million vaccines and when.
The CDC is moving forward and being very proactive in having some of those early discussions before that vaccine's even finished being authorized at the FDA.
This week, Moderna applied for emergency authorization for its vaccine, almost 2 weeks after drug maker Pfizer. Both still awaiting approval from U.S. regulators. On Tuesday, the Trump administration tried to hurry them along, the president's chief of staff summoning the head of the Food and Drug Administration to the White House for an in-person briefing. It's a move critics fear may further undermine public faith in vaccine safety.
I will take the vaccine when it does come. Not immediately. I want to see, how well the actual public does with it.
U.S. air carriers are reportedly transporting doses now to some of America's hardest hit states. And inoculations could start by the middle of this month for healthcare workers and the elderly in nursing care facilities. Most Americans likely having to wait until mid-spring. And now a new U.S. government report suggesting that COVID-19 may have been in the U.S. at the end of last year, weeks before the first diagnosed case on American soil on January the 20th. 39 samples of blood donations from 3 Western states showing traces of COVID-19 antibodies in mid-December 2019. Meanwhile, a group of lawmakers on Tuesday unveiled a bipartisan bill for nearly $1 trillion in COVID relief.
We recognize that families all across America are struggling, that businesses are closing, that hospitals are overwhelmed.
That it would be stupidity on steroids if Congress left for Christmas without doing an interim package as a bridge.
A third of the money earmarked for small businesses, and $16 billion for vaccine distribution and testing, if it gets passed. Well, the Democratic Speaker of the House and the Republican Majority Leader haven't spoken about COVID relief since the elections in early November, with most of the safety nets from the previous packages set to expire at the end of this month. Millions of Americans are bracing for a tough winter. Rowie Ruttenberg, CGTN in Washington.
Well, let's head to South Africa now. A recovery in the country's manufacturing sector may be losing steam. ABSA Group's Purchasing Managers Index, which of course measures manufacturing sentiment, fell to a 4-month low in November. Now, the index, compiled by the Bureau for Economic Research, fell to 52.6 from a record high of 60.9 in October. The reading remains above 50 points, which signals an expansion. However, the decline comes after 3 consecutive moves upward. And according to ABSA, as output nears pre-pandemic levels, the manufacturing sector will need sustained demand growth in order to fuel a further output expansion in the sector. Well, let's now take this all apart with Angelo Coppola. He joins us in Johannesburg. Angelo, always good to see you. Now, as ABSA points out in its PMI, the index reading still remains above 50, which of course signals an expansion. But what do analysts say about the prospects for demand growth in the next 6 to 12 months? Can the sector sustain this expansion?
Well, look, Uche, everything depends on demand. Also bear in mind that South Africa was in recession prior to the COVID hard lockdown in March this year. So our manufacturing sector was already under duress then. The hard lockdown was the final nail in the coffin for many smaller businesses. And of course, we saw those horrendous job losses too. That was around 2 million people that lost their jobs in that quarter. Businesses were closing down and demand was muted. Back to those prospects though, a lot depends on our trading partners and their economies. So if there's any kind of demand, well, that'll be fine, but there's no point manufacturing anything and there's no one to buy it from you. So we haven't seen that demand just yet. It's been muted at best. Also consider that some of our trading partner countries are going through more lockdowns, which will impact demand, of course. We know that there's some movement and demand being built up in China and also in the US. China, of course, as you know, is our biggest trading partner. So that's good news. So it's an independent relationship that's key at the moment. So if there's no demand, that means there's no manufacturing or supply, Uche.
Well, let's get a picture of what's actually happening on ground. We know the manufacturing sector was brought, of course, to a screeching halt with the nationwide lockdowns and, of course, the ban on alcohol sales in the country. Give us a sense of what activity and sentiment has been like on the ground since the easing of those lockdown measures. Is South Africa's manufacturing sector fully back to business as usual, or are we seeing a shift in how stakeholders are approaching their business?
Well, look, as you know, sentiment is what it's all about. There was a sense of relief when the lockdown levels were reduced and people were allowed to return to some semblance of normality, but it's definitely not business as usual because, as everyone we've spoken to says to us, 2020 has taught us a lot of lessons. Technology has been embraced, and office-bound businesses and their owners have come to understand that owning or renting big premises in high-end suburbs or business sectors is suboptimal. Working from home seems to have become the new norm, at least for now, and then there's also no clear indication when the corporate risk managers will actually give the green light for staff en masse to return to their offices. Some of the big advisory firms that we've spoken to are looking at late January, maybe February, even March, as a possibility of when some or most of their staff will return to work. Of course, some of their staff are returning to work now, but it's on a 2-day basis, and then it's about 20 or 30% in those buildings. But that could all change if the current infection rates continue climbing. So everything's been turned on its head right now, and it's probably going to carry on turning on its head, Uche.
Well, the sector was already struggling before the pandemic with issues such as power shortages and the issues at Eskom and, of course, low business confidence as well. So how do these issues feature into the outlook of South Africa's manufacturing sector and certainly its recovery going forward?
Well, look, besides those demand issues, let's put them aside for now. Eskom remains a thorn in everyone's side. It's negotiating at the moment to recoup around $4.8 billion from consumers, and the biggest of those are in the manufacturing sector and then, of course, the mines. If they get approval to recoup those operating costs, the question on everybody's lips at the moment is how they're going to impose those increases. The mining sector, for one, has told us that they're going to be calling for a delay in any increases for now, and they're asking that Eskom apply a very light touch. And that's because it could cause the sector untold damage. The segment, in fact, represents around 15% of Eskom's client base, so it will serve Eskom in good stead to listen to the mining sector. The confidence levels, of course, are increasing, but again, it's all about demand. Government has attempted to smooth out some of those policy kinks that have been bedeviling us for the last couple of years, and their latest plan does appear to have some substance to it, as well as budgets and targets. But again, we live in a time of COVID, and those hotspots and spikes can change everything, as we've seen already. Uche.
Well, as always, Angelo, thank you for your insight there. That is Angelo Coppola joining us in Johannesburg. Let's now turn our attention to tonight's company headlines. Access Bank is in talks about a potential acquisition of assets belonging to Bob Diamond's Atlas Mara. Now, Nigeria's biggest lender is seeking to expand its reach in the rest of Africa. The Lagos-based bank is interested in Atlas Mara's businesses in Botswana, Zimbabwe, and Zambia. Deliberations are in preliminary stages and no final decision has been made just yet. Meanwhile, Airbnb says it is aiming for a valuation of up to $34.8 billion in its initial public offering, in what would cap a stunning recovery in its fortunes. This was after the U.S. home rental firm's business was heavily damaged by the COVID-19 pandemic earlier this year. In a regulatory filing, Airbnb set a target price range of between $44 and $50 a piece to sell 50 million shares, which of course would pull in about $2.6 billion. Airbnb could end up selling $2.85 billion at the upper end of the range. And finally, Salesforce is buying workplace messaging app Slack for $27.7 billion. This deal marks the largest acquisition in the San Francisco-based cloud-based company's history. Under the terms of the agreement, Slack shareholders will receive about $26.79 in cash and 0.08 shares of Salesforce stock per Slack share. Now, the move will allow Salesforce to bolster its business offerings going forward. And that is a look at our corporate headlines. Well, let's head into a short break now. Still to come on the show. South Africa's unemployment insurance fund faces collapse. And Nigeria plans to ban fish imports in the next 2 years.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global business, only on CGTN.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back. Now, South Africa's Unemployment Insurance Fund has come under heavy pressure to support ailing businesses and employees who were affected by the COVID-19 lockdown. The Department of Labour has warned that any more relief could cripple the fund, leaving millions of people in the country without any relief at all. Our correspondent Sumitra Naidu reports.
Let us Last month, President Cyril Ramaphosa announced that the COVID-19 temporary employer-employee relief scheme would be extended to help those affected with their loss of income. $3.6 million has already been paid to those in need. But the Department of Labor, which oversees the Unemployment Insurance Fund, has warned that any more relief will cause the scheme to collapse.
Initially, our budget for this was 40 billion for the initial 3 months period. And consequently, the lockdown period was extended to where it is now. The payments were at 54 billion rands, which is almost 14 billion more. With the latest extension from the 16th to the 15th of October, we had indicated that our ability to continue paying the test benefit is becoming less and less.
But labour unions believe it's critical to keep the relief scheme going, especially for businesses, so they can hold on to their employees and hire more staff. According to Statistics South Africa, 2 million people lost their jobs since the hard lockdown began in March. Unemployment in South Africa is now at 30.8%.
What's going to happen now is that you have a situation where many of these employers who've been cooperating, trying to keep these workers in their books because they were partnering with labor and government through the UIF Test Fund, they are going to really let go of these workers because most of them have not reached the production levels where they can afford these workers. So what's going to happen, we are going to see more retrenchments because employers without a test fund, they are clear, they are going to let go of some of these workers.
To make matters worse, the temporary employer-employee relief scheme has been marred by fraud and corruption. Government put the scheme on hold for the Auditor General to investigate.
The Unemployment Insurance Fund was struggling before COVID-19. The impacts of the virus has just exacerbated its problems. While the government is committing further funding, the Treasury is scrambling to find the money. The Finance Minister has already warned of a growing debt burden in South Africa.
With the economy still in a deep recession and unemployment rising, South Africa finds itself in a very tight corner. Sumitra Nadu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Meanwhile, Nigeria's government is now stepping up efforts to revive all oil refineries in the country as it struggles to manage the rising costs of importing refined fuel. Now, the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation says it will begin the second phase of the rehabilitation of the Port Harcourt refinery in the first quarter of 2021. It targets to get all 4 refineries running by 2023. Here's CGTN's Deji Batmus with more.
The Port Harcourt refinery, which can process 210,000 barrels of oil per day, is Nigeria's biggest at the moment. But like the other 3 refineries, it's been operating well below its output capacity. In the past 1 year, all the refineries which are government-owned have been idle as they await maintenance. The Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation has announced it will begin maintenance works at the Port Harcourt refinery from early next year.
We have lost so much time and opportunities to build all the refineries we could have built, to create all the jobs that could have been created. And in fact, we are positioned by geography to be able to supply all the petroleum products required in West and Central Africa.
Nigeria's 4 refineries have a combined production capacity of 445,000 barrels of crude per day, which should be sufficient to meet around 70% of daily domestic demand. But with the refineries not operational, the country has been forced to import petrol for its domestic consumption, and this has come at a very huge economic cost.
So we have a very unfortunate situation where we take crude oil from the ground in Nigeria and we create wealth for several countries where these products are shipped, refined and brought back to us.
Getting the Port Harcourt refinery up and running would help the country cut down on petrol imports and help it conserve much-needed foreign exchange in the process. In a marked departure from the past, the NNPC says that once it revives the refinery, it will get private investors to run it rather than sell the facility. Labour unions in the country are strongly opposed to any plan to sell the refineries.
When you talk about a PPP arrangement, definitely, I mean, it is the best virtually everywhere. The government can come in from one angle, then the private investors can come in. If we cross-fertilize that knowledge and idea in the interest of Nigeria and also the private investors, definitely it will be a win-win situation.
The rehabilitation of the refinery is coming at a time when work is nearing completion at the privately owned 650,000 barrels per day Dangote refinery in Lagos. The refinery is expected to come on stream in 2021, while the 4 government-operated refineries are expected to be fully operational in 2023. So if all goes according to plan, Nigeria could actually move being a net importer of refined fuels, including petrol, to be a big of the final product. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Now, Nigeria has also announced plans to ban fish imports in the next 2 years. The West African nation spends over $1 billion importing fish annually, but the country is now focusing on boosting local production. Here's CGTN's Kelechi Mekalam with the details.
Fresh, smoked, dried, frozen. Kado Fish Market in Nigeria's capital is the one-stop hub for all kinds of fish. An average 10,000 tons of fish is offloaded here daily. Fish is the most accessible source of protein in Nigeria, but only 30% is produced locally and the other 70% is imported. But the government is considering a ban on fish imports by 2022.
If you say you want to ban fish, how many fish are you which, and you must first of all tell Nigerians the type of fish you want to ban and what are the substitutes. What are the alternatives to those fish? Do we have them? And if we don't have them, you cannot ban what you don't have, what you don't produce. You must have those products before you ban. If you don't, then you are going to cause more damage to the economy. We must first of all identify the fish that the common man can afford. It is when we do that, then we can say, yes, we can now decide to ban fish. We have arrived.
Nigeria has a huge annual fish demand of about 3.6 million metric tons. Local production amounts to 1.1 million metric tons. Report from the country's central bank shows that every year, Nigeria spends $1.2 billion on fish imports. So experts see the import ban as a welcome development.
It's going to have a great effect on the local fish production. Fisheries value chain is very huge, from production to processing, processing to value addition, from value addition to packaging, and then to the retailing. So it's going to have a lot of effect in creating jobs and employment, and even boosting local GDP if proper strategies are put in place to caution the effect that is going to happen after the ban.
Initiating a ban on the importation of fish is just one step. However, there are other factors to be considered.
You need to ensure that these small-scale farmers that made up the major fish producer in Nigeria are trained on good agricultural practice. They have access to capital to expand their fish production. Youth are made up of over 60% of the workforce in Nigeria. You need to encourage these youth that do not have any source of living to come into fish production. You also need to increase value addition, because even when they produce, we still have wastage in the fish sector. And so you need to increase or make them have access to local improved technology in terms of fish processing.
Fisheries sector contributes about 4.5% to the national GDP. Experts project the figures could rise by 10% if the problems of insecurity and weak infrastructure are tackled. Although it's still a long way to closing the demand gap in the fisheries sector, experts believe boosting local production is a step in the right direction. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
You're watching Global Business Africa. We have lots more news for you still coming up. Yet another British retail chain goes into liquidation. And Hong Kong's luxury hotels target working women for staycations.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate
those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
I try to not let it affect me, but there are days when it does. I'm a human being, and to see patients in a hospital bed and their family members are not there, there's no one there to hold their hand, that human touch, you know?
I just hope everyone can remember that the situation is not permanent and that everything will get better eventually.
Let's now take a look at other news making headlines at this hour. The United Nations and Ethiopia have signed a deal to allow humanitarian access to the Tigray region. Now, reports indicate that access will only be allowed in areas that are under federal government control. The first mission to carry out a needs assessment begins working today. The region has around 6 million people who have been cut off during fighting that began a month ago. And Al-Shabaab militiamen have stepped up their terror attacks in Somalia as the country heads to the polls. Earlier this week, the insurgents carried out a suicide attack on Mogadishu and a raid on an army base in central Somalia that left 15 people dead. The militant group claims to have overrun the base, killing scores of soldiers before parading weapons and army vehicles they seized during the attack. And finally, Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has become the North African country's first leader to visit South Sudan since its independence. Now, this week's visit by the Egyptian president highlights the importance of relations between the two nations. Egypt has improved its ties with Africa's youngest nation on issues regarding economic development, Nile projects, as well as regional conflicts. And that's a recap of today's top headlines. Well, let's now get more on our top story this hour. Britain, of course, has become the first nation to approve the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine for general use. The vaccine should start arriving in the UK within days, and it could be used across the UK as early as next week.
The UK woke to the news not of another hopeful sign, but a genuine milestone. The Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine, developed in record time, has been approved for public use, effective immediately. There are nearly 1 million doses ready in the UK, with 40 million on order, and so the rollout can start.
Residents in care homes for older adults and care home workers are the highest priority. Following that are those 80 years of age and above, alongside frontline healthcare and social care workers.
The logistics will be tricky, not least because the Pfizer vaccine must be stored at -70 degrees. Once it goes in a normal fridge, it's only good for 5 days.
People will be immune 7 days after the second dose. A partial immunity does occur after the first dose, and we can see some protection occurring after day 12 of the first dose, but the best immunity is 7 days after the second dose.
Being first, scientists say they've been thorough, and the scientific community concurs.
Where the time has been gained is actually in streamlining the whole process from the start of the research and development. Things that would have been done in sequence have been done in an overlapping sense, and people will realize that manufacturers even have been producing vaccine in advance of an approval. Well, this is, they've taken a risk in doing that.
But talk to the public and the reservations are still easy to find.
I don't know, obviously lots of drugs come out quite quickly, but we usually have quite a few years to test them before we give them to the main public.
We definitely need a vaccine. I can understand people's concerns about it being rushed through, but that's what the trials are there for.
But the experts are clear. This may be the first, but the world needs as many vaccines as it can get. So if this is a new phase, it only starts here.
Well, let's get more on this from Andrew Wilson. He joins us now in London. Great to have you on the show with us, Andrew. Now, interestingly, some in the EU have criticised the UK's fast decision to approve this vaccine. They say it's hasty and problematic. Are there any voices in the UK right now echoing these thoughts? And certainly, will it affect a rollout of the vaccine going forward?
Well, the rollouts are the easier part of that question. They've got about 800,000 doses of the vaccine either in the country or on their way into the country momentarily. So that would be the start. That would start happening right about perhaps even Monday or Tuesday next week. Regarding the speed of the regulator here in the UK, there was a fair amount of talk about that tonight at the Prime Minister's press conference from Downing Street. And by and large, the regulatory authority have said that they're happy with everything they've seen on the data. It satisfies them. They have not, they say, cut any corners. One of the explanations they do give for having come up with such a quick decision on the efficacy and the safety of this vaccine is that they've been working alongside the producers since the summer. In other words, on a, if you like, an informal basis, the regulatory investigators have already been looking at and sharing the data with the producers so that by the time it came to regulation phase, the last couple of weeks, they were already familiar with a lot of the material, and that enabled them to move through it rather faster perhaps than they otherwise would have. Remember that normally regulation in a vaccine would come before any of the vaccines are even produced at all. Production would start after regulation and acceptable. So that in itself makes this a unique situation. So the regulators here in the UK are still saying and maintaining that they've done their job completely thoroughly and they're happy with the speed it took.
Now, given the fact that the UK will be the first nation administering this vaccine on a massive scale, is it clear what exactly a rollout of this vaccine will look like for the British people, including how many will be vaccinated this year and how people will sort of know when their turn will come?
Exactly. That's the difficult part. It's how to organise the logistics of linking up potential patients, potential people to be vaccinated with supplies of the vaccine. Now, as I said, nearly 1 million are on their way into the country now. Probably by the end of the year, 10 million doses. So 10 million doses is 5 million patients because it's 2 doses per patient. But also there's this concern about the transportation. Now, because it can only be stored at -70, this particular vaccine is a bit unwieldy in that respect. The hospitals, 50 hospitals around the UK, will be used as initial hubs for storage and distribution of the vaccine. One of the problems with the vaccine is it comes in boxes of 975 doses and can't be split up prior to being thawed out from this -70. So they have to start looking at how they can break up those different parcels into smaller parcels. And when the regulator who has to approve the method for doing that gives the go-ahead, then they can start looking at ways of distributing it into smaller local health authority areas where they can then organise contact with patients. One of the challenges is that after 21 days, a second dose must be given to each patient. It's making sure they've got the communication set up enough to be able to vaccinate patients one time and then make sure the same patient can be recalled for a second vaccination. Now, they've made it clear they're concentrating on people in care homes and the staff in care homes to start with, and then moving swiftly on to people who are working in the wider National Health Service and people who are over 85 years of age. That at least gives them a fairly targeted area to start with for the first 10 million doses that'll probably be managed this year. By that time, by the spring, or at least by early next year, they should have a clear idea about how they'll be able to spread out from these 50 hospitals allocated at the moment to smaller areas to distribute the vaccine on a more penetrating scale into the population.
Well, Andrew, the world is certainly watching. Many thanks for that update there. That's Andrew Wilson joining us in London. And still in Britain, the retail sector has suffered another casualty with department store Debenhams going into liquidation. It comes after sportswear chain JD Sports pulled out of rescue talks, spooked by the collapse of another giant, Arcadia. Now, Debenhams says it will continue to trade to clear stock as administrators seek a buyer for all or parts of its business. Here's CGTN's Nawid Jabrakil reporting.
Almost 250 years of retail history now set to be a thing of the past. Retail giant Debenhams is set to close its stores in the UK, putting 12,000 jobs at risk.
Debenhams has for a while been struggling with high rent bills, a lack of relevancy, and the continued shift to online spending, all exacerbated, of course, by the pandemic.
The company had already cut around 6,500 jobs since May, but couldn't turn its fortunes around.
I thought Debenhams was quite a good brand. I thought they would be able to kind of, make it through.
It's been a long time coming, really, in terms of the failure. I think it's been like a long, slow decline for Debenhams. It's not really changed.
I think it's sad because I don't do any online shopping. I shop in stores, and I'd like to keep all the shops open.
It just, again, really puts it into perspective how much COVID's actually affecting everybody, and, things are closing and people are suffering, yeah.
The move comes a day after fellow heavyweight Arcadia Group fell into administration. It now stands to lose its brands, including international fashion store Topshop, and it means another 13,000 jobs on the line.
Although the two companies were once dominant players in UK retail, the factors behind their demise are similar. Both were battered by COVID-19 enforced closures, which hits physical stores the hardest. But more broadly, they failed to keep up with the shift to online shopping and were unable to compete in an industry that's increasingly digital. It's a lesson that many others are learning up and down British high streets.
The government has responded to the news, saying it remains fully committed to the sector and that its coronavirus supporters total almost $375 billion. Despite the astronomical figure, this is emerging as a dark week for British retail. The loss of more household names, thousands of jobs and worries about who might be next. Nawid Jabrakil, CGTN, London.
And let's head to India now, where thousands of farmers continue to protest against 3 farming laws, which they claim are unfair and exploitative. They've been demonstrating at multiple border points of the capital, Delhi, for about a week now. Now, talks between the government and the farmer representatives have failed to break the deadlock. So what exactly is the issue, and why are India's farmers on the streets in the midst of a pandemic? Here's CGTN's Nayan Seth finding out more.
Thousands of farmers are protesting at the capital's doorsteps. A 24/7 campaign during a chilly Delhi December. They have braved water cannons, tear gas and police barricades. Even highways dug up by the government to stop them from entering Delhi. Farmers have travelled hundreds of kilometres to protest what they call the black laws, which would sound the death knell for them.
The big stores and corporations will put an end to us small farmers and reduce us to just being laborers.
In September this year, the Indian government rushed through 3 farm laws in the parliament. The new legislation makes it easier for farmers to sell their produce directly to private buyers, while bypassing the government-regulated markets called the mandi. In the current mandi system, the price of produce is decided at the market floor while assuring minimum prices. There is also the minimum support price, or the MSP. It's the price set by the government to purchase directly from the farmer. This rate safeguards the farmer to a minimum profit for the harvest. The Modi government says that the current system of the mandi and MSP will continue, and the mechanisms under the new laws will give more options to the farmers. But the farmers are skeptical. They fear this will lead to the end of wholesale markets and assured prices, leaving them at the mercy of big corporations.
We've seen with the corn flour that we produce, when we get paid less for it, big corporations sell it for a marked up price to the consumers in retail outlets, Why is the government taking away earnings of small farmers to fill the pockets of a few big corporations?
The government also argues that the new laws will create a one nation, one market scenario, and farmers can sell their produce anywhere in the country. But the farmer groups contend that in many states they are allowed to do exactly that in the present system. Over 40% of India's total workforce is employed in agriculture, while the sector accounts for 15% of the total GDP. Farmers in India face a variety of problems: rising debts, lowering productivity, small land holdings, and lack of storage capacity. Defenders of the new laws believe they will ease the farmers' burdens and improve their incomes. But some experts argue privatization of agriculture without proper regulation would make matters worse. Nayan Seth, CGTN.
Now, in Hong Kong, where luxury hotels are focusing more on working women for their staycations, the women are still keen to spend their money on such packages despite the COVID-19 pandemic, and that has helped Hong Kong's struggling tourism sector. Annie Chang reports.
Cake, Prosecco, balloons and spa credits. These are part of the BFF Moments staycation package at the upscale Cordis Hotel in Hong Kong's Mong Kok district. With this year's tourism down 92.4% year-on-year for the first 9 months due to coronavirus, luxury hotels have been targeting the local market with staycations. And now there seems to be a newer emphasis on tailored packages targeting the city's roughly 1.8 million working women. Euromonitor International says that population's almost 280,000 Hong Kong dollars disposable income per capita in 2019 increased by 17.5% from 2015. It also says their estimated disposable income per capita of about 252,000 Hong Kong dollars for this year comes up to a decent 71% of that of working men. The Cordis Hotel launched 16 packages in June, and more than half are generated for women. Staycations account for 25% of occupancy at the Cordis, and a majority of 70% who book these packages are women.
The celebration, the BFF moments, those are the most popular ones, the ladies' staycation packages. We are going to continue to create them. We did a second round in September. We tweaked it and we added some more. And now we're looking at January relaunching it again. And we still continue to focus on women.
While some aren't keen because of the pandemic,
I don't feel comfortable going to staycation under these kind of circumstances.
Many are still very interested.
I'm willing to spend on staycations because I worked at the bank for many years and the lifestyle was repetitive. Changing the environment is quite special.
I was willing to spend about like 1,500 Hong Kong dollars per night, like a really fancy and nice one with a girls' night. So as long as it's safe, I'm willing to do it.
It's more carefree going with girlfriends. We have more chances to connect and tighten our relationship.
An expert from Colliers International says staycations are more common with luxury hotels because they have the facilities for it.
When you're targeting women specifically, as a lot of hotels have, people want to go out, but they want to do it in a safe, controlled environment. If you know you're in a hotel where there's strong controls on hygiene and other things, then you might be more comfortable in that particular environment. So I think the staycations catering to that need will continue to do well.
He adds that staycations have created a new revenue stream, with occupancy increasing to over 40% and revenue per available room increasing by about double from April to September. He foresees these packages expanding to a wider variety in the long term.
At the policy address, Chief Executive Carrie Lam pledged about 600 million Hong Kong dollars to help Hong Kong's tourism sector. She also announced a pilot scheme that will use hotels as transitional housing. The struggling industry remains hopeful that things can get better. Ann Chang, CGTN, Hong Kong.
Now, like many nations, the COVID-19 outbreak has hit Japan's labor market. The Labor Ministry says over 73,000 people have been laid off due to the pandemic. A high percentage of those workers are women. Many of the country's major firms also have announced pay cuts that are making many Japanese women think about their job security. Here's CGTN's Terence Terashima reporting from Tokyo.
Japanese women have borne the brunt of COVID-19's impact on the country's job market. Although more women have been joining the workforce in recent years, that does not mean they're getting much recognition. 55% of female employees hold irregular positions, which are typically low-paid, non-career track jobs. And when the axe falls and workers face job and wage cuts due to the pandemic, guess who's worst affected? Of course, it's women.
This has changed many women's career sentiments. They increasingly feel they just can't go for whatever's available, but proactively seek new careers or skills to change their predicament.
Despite former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's campaign to empower women, Japan still struggles to get more highly educated female workers into productive positions.
Women often have low-income jobs, whereas men often have higher wages. To reduce the wage gap, you must make higher wage jobs available for women. We have very capable women, and they need to be more confident in taking on such challenges. Japan needs to change, and women must make more effort to acquire skills and put them to better use.
Ran Sakura used to be a nursery teacher, but recent developments have made her think seriously about her future. What she was doing was low-paid, but at the same time demanding. So despite having no relevant experience, she decided to study for and pursue a career as an illustrator.
I like children, and it was a satisfying job, but when I thought about the future, I wondered if I would be physically able to continue the job. Also, I thought about the income and what might happen when I have a family of my own. I wasn't confident that I could continue.
Japanese women are increasingly seeking career advice and studying for qualifications to access better opportunities or become independent. If the country's work culture isn't going to create opportunities for them, they realize they have to do it themselves.
After COVID-19, I think that the people think that if the company is not doing well, not only women or non-regular workers, the full-time workers are also looking for the jobs. So I think they were more interested in the professional skills or something that, made them secure in the future. So I think this change is taking place right now.
Honestly, there were a lot of unexpected turns and problems I faced when I became a freelance illustrator. But they are things that you will not find out unless you try. I think the experience is valuable, and I have no regrets about pursuing a new career.
Experts say Japan's work culture needs to give more weight to ability rather than gender or seniority, so women can realize their full potential and compete with men for more stable jobs. Terence Terushima, CGTN, Tokyo.
And of course, Black Friday and Cyber Monday have passed. Now it's time for Giving Tuesday, an event started in 2012 to urge people to donate to charity. Because of the pandemic, charities are getting more creative than ever in hopes of reaching contributors of all ages. Here's Mark New with the details.
At just 13 years of age, Chloe Thompson has been running the charity Chloe Cares since she was 8.
So the community fridge is all filled up, and this is just an easy and simple way to give back.
This Giving Tuesday, Chloe is busy stocking a community fridge, sewing and filling care bags with supplies for the needy, and encouraging thousands of kids to volunteer as part of Giving Tuesday Spark.
There's so many families right now who are struggling at the moment, and it's like I said, it's really important because you never know, it could be your neighbor that could be going through something and you just never know it. And giving back and just doing something small could really make a big difference.
Nonprofit Charity Navigator rates charities so that people can feel confident about who they're giving to. It recently surveyed charities to better understand their operations during the pandemic.
Nonprofits are the safety nets of society, so they've been strained in more ways than ever imagined. We're seeing about 72% of the surveyed nonprofits that we rate are reporting that they're suffering financially. Although on Charity Navigator specifically, we are seeing a surge in giving.
Since March, Charity Navigator has seen a 115% increase in money donated through their site, giving hope that on this year's Giving Tuesday, overall U.S. donation totals could top last year's record of $1.97 billion in 24 hours.
The industry experts are signaling that giving should be strong. There's certainly been a number of ways that nonprofits have innovated, both programmatically and also financially, with many organizations that typically rely heavily on events, taking those virtual.
That includes some highly rated nonprofits on Charity Navigator's site, like Save the Children, which has been serving kids in need for more than a century.
But we don't want to just be known to be your grandmother's charity. We also want to be your grandchild's charity. And in order to do that, we need to be relevant to the next generation.
5 years ago, Save the Children created an offshoot, Gaming Tuesday, that has grown year after year. It's teaming up with vloggers, gamers, and content streamers to put buttons or links on their platforms, supporting hassle-free Save the Children donations.
Gaming in particular during the pandemic is increasingly more popular by all ages, and they can create a fundraiser, and that fundraiser benefits Save the Children in our work around the world, and it also gives gamers an ability to connect with their fans around the cause they care about.
This year, Gaming Tuesday is actually 2 weeks long. It started on Tuesday, November 24th, and ends on Tuesday, November 8th. Since its inception, Gaming Tuesday has helped Save the Children raise more than $500,000. It's another sign that younger generations do care about giving. And having made and filled more than 5,000 bags in her young philanthropic career, Chloe Thompson says what keeps her going is smile money.
Thinking about all the hard work and everything that you've done just to make this one bag that made you want to quit. And then you see this joy on this person's face because you gave them this bag. Then it just makes you want to keep on going because you want to give more joy to more people.
Mark New, CGTN, San Francisco.
Well, let's move on now to commodity markets today. Cocoa prices continue to fall as investors take to the sidelines. Now, traders say a simmering dispute between the industry and top producers, Ivory Coast and Ghana, over a premium aimed at decreasing poverty amongst cocoa farmers is knocking market sentiment. Now, the dispute has also come just as chocolate demand is falling due to the coronavirus-induced recession. In the meantime, oil was steady today. The UK's approval of a COVID-19 vaccine for use suddenly helped to boost hopes for a future recovery in oil demand. But of course, OPEC and its allies created uncertainty in the market after delaying a 2-day formal meeting to decide whether to increase production in January. Meanwhile, gold prices remaining weak today as progress in COVID-19 vaccines weigh on the metal safe haven appeal. Well, let's head into a short break now, still coming up on the show. An African online goods supplier rolls out electric rickshaws.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
Now, African startup SocoWatch, which is an online supplier of goods to micro retailers, is deploying electric tuk-tuks or rickshaws. That's a first on the continent that could slash fleet maintenance costs by more than 50%. Now, the move is a potentially welcome effort in a region where cities are grappling with growing air pollution caused by exhaust from beat-up and poorly serviced vehicles. The firm has so far deployed 8 locally assembled electric tuk-tuks in Uganda. It is now looking to deploy an additional 8 in Rwanda before rolling out the vehicles to Kenya and Tanzania. CGTN's Alexandria Majala brings us those details.
Now we are connecting the battery.
28-year-old Mary Marjorie Nanchinga works for SocoWatch. The company is an online supplier of goods to micro retailers. And now SocoWatch is deploying electric tuk-tuks, a first on the continent that could slash fleet maintenance costs by more than half.
And we truly do believe that electric vehicles are the future of mobility, both around the world, but also specifically in Africa, and especially when it comes to powering commerce for retailers across the continent.
The Kenyan-based firm developed an app which small retailers in East Africa can log orders of various goods to restock their shops. Once the orders are received, SokoWatch then dispatches the goods from its warehouses to the retailers. In a region where cities are plagued by gridlock with narrow and potholed roads, SokoWatch adopted the three-wheeled rickshaws as a primary means of transport to deliver the goods.
Before I got to know about SokoWatch, I would run out of stock and not have anyone to help me replenish it. I lost a lot of customers, but now everything is fine. I simply contact SokoWatch and they will deliver my stock.
Previously, micro retailers would have to travel downtown in order to be able to get the stock that they needed. This would cost them time, this would cost them money in terms of the customers that they were not serving, and also in terms of shop security. When you leave your shop in the hands of someone else, you don't know what's happening when you're not there.
The move is a potentially welcome effort in a region where cities are grappling with growing air pollution caused by exhaust from beat-up and poorly serviced vehicles. The firm is looking to expand elsewhere in Africa after their success in East Africa and capture more of the continent's small retailers that it estimates at 10 million. SokoWatch has so far deployed 8 locally assembled electric tuk-tuks in Uganda and is looking to deploy an additional 8 in Rwanda before rolling out the vehicles in Kenya and Tanzania.
Number 1 is our forward gear and number 3 is our reverse gear.
The firm currently has 178 gasoline-powered tuk-tuks in addition to the 8 electric vehicles in Uganda. The vehicles are used to deliver goods from its warehouses to 17,000 micro-retailers across 9 cities in East Africa. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
And before we leave you today, here's a quick look at Africa's currencies. South Africa's rand underperforming today ahead of a court hearing over a government wage dispute with public sector unions. Now, the case is expected to have major implications on government spending in the near term. Meanwhile, Nigeria's Naira gaining some ground against the dollar after a new CBN policy on diaspora remittances improved dollar supply in the country. It appreciated against the dollar on the parallel market, hovering around 490 to 495 naira per dollar. At the official window, it hovers at around 391 to 395 naira per dollar. And that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching.